It's been a while since I heard that.
I know.
That was cool.
Hello, I'm Tate Hieronymus. I directed and edited the SABE series and created it. And yeah.
Hey, my name is Jonathan Easley. I have a YouTube page called Western Bigfoot Exploration, and I'm from Idaho. I live in Boise, and I took these two characters out to the woods to try to see if we can get any Bigfoot activity in this area.
And I'm Ron Read. I have a Facebook page called Trailing Giants, and I also took a lot of participation in this Sabe series as the narrator.
The narrator.
The narrator.
It sounded like you were farting into a can a little bit. I'm just saying.
Well, that too.
Yeah. Now, Idaho is like 75% wilderness. I mean, if you look at a map of Idaho where the cities are, it's kind of along the outer perimeter. And if you look at the inner side of Idaho, it's just full of mountains and trees and very few roads and very little of it is inhabited. So there's a lot of potential up there. Since I've moved here about almost 2 years now. I've talked to a lot of researchers and connected with people that have had a few sightings and maybe some reports of some obscure things like, wood knocks or whatever. But I've talked to a good handful of people, and I feel like I'm making progress here. And in this part right here, I'm just kind of explaining that there are creeks behind us. There are creeks all around us, and it's my belief that in this particular area that I guided you guys to.
Wait, no, there was okay. I had to interrupt you there for a second because
go for it. Let's see.
There was an area you wanted to go, remember? But
yes,
I was complaining that I didn't have enough gas money at the time, so I was like, let's go to this area. Because it was kind of
had just come. I mean, you drove from, and just to paint a picture for people, you drove from Florida to Bluff Creek
to Oregon to
10, 11, 12
up
days
to Washington
in Bluff Creek, up to Oregon, up to Washington, down to Idaho. So it's like, I mean, whoever you are, you're gonna start to run out of money eventually. So we were in a little bit of a pinch, and we settled on a spot that was near the place that I wanted to go, but not all the way there. And it was kind of a surprise that it was a great place. So
no history of sightings or anything like that to go off of. We just kind of looked at the placement of available water sources and kind of in the general vicinity, what kind of Bigfoot activity had happened. And Tate does this thing that I do as well. And I think, Jonathan, you do it because we've all been doing it. We can kind of look at a map and see where activity is, but not get misguided because people think, well, this is an area where Bigfoot is. Well, this is an area where Bigfoot might be sometimes and people are at other times. So that's where the sighting comes in, is there's two halves. You got to have people and you got to have Bigfoot. But there are plenty of places on the map where there are no Bigfoot sightings that Bigfoot might be there. So we're really good and intuitive at looking at a map and looking for good Bigfoot potential, even though there might not be sign there, so we can we put all the pieces together and it'll surprise you what we settle upon. And this is one of those spots where it's like, it's like tossing a dart at the dartboard in the dark. Let's see where it lands, and we hit the nail on the head. Some really cool stuff happened here.
Because like you're going with what you said. When you've been doing this for so long, and you kind of like can look at a map and see that, you kind of get better at that with time. And like, this is a good habitat. Even like you said, there's no history of sightings. It's just you need the culmination of the right area, like where people are and where they could access themselves.
In a lot of ways, we've started to subconsciously learn a lot of the techniques that field biologists use to find their individual animals of study. We go through a similar process of honing in on areas that have the best potential.
Exactly.
Now, why we decided in this general area in the first place was because I've gone up into these mountains a dozen times, right? And it's not a lot, but for the year and a half, almost 2 years that I've been here, I've gone up into these mountains and I just start talking to people, and you'd be surprised the stories you get from like people that are legitimately telling you what they think they saw, you know. And one of them was from a certain resort up in the Silver Creek area. And he had told me that he thinks he saw what looked like a guy running on the ridge right behind the resort. This is a extremely remote resort. It has no electricity, nothing like that. It runs off of a generator. Um, it's way, way, way back there. It takes 2 hours to get to from Boise, put it that way. And he says he thinks he saw something run across. He sent his brother up there on an ATV to tell you the most. They said they found bear scat a couple hours later. I said, well, what did you see? He said, it looked like a guy running at dusk. I spoke to another gentleman right around that area that said he had trees pushed over kind of in a strategic way. Like they'd start walking and trees would be pushed over. They'd stop and they'd look up and they'd see nothing. They stood there for several minutes looking up into the tree line, didn't see anything. They'd start walking again and trees got pushed over. So it was like almost strategic. And that happened 3 different times to them over the course of like maybe 10 minutes or something like that. So
real
it was
quickly,
weird to him.
sorry to cut you
All
off.
in the general area, though. This is all in the general area.
This is when it started to get really weird, right here, because we were hearing stuff and I
Yes.
stopped you, and let's just listen for a second.
So we're sitting here
Mhm.
around the fire. We're just having a conversation. I paused you for a second because I thought I heard something over there. And in the middle of that pause, we heard a... That was a pretty clean knock sound. I mean, clean, and we were quiet for it, there's no doubt. And we weren't filming either. But we looked at each other. Dude, we're gonna have to go out down that road. Yeah, I was a clean knock, dude. It was a great knock. Yeah.
Listen to this.
It's been a while since I heard that.
I know.
That was cool too.
The excitement on ourselves, we were like, because I think Ron, it was I think I called you a while after the fact, and you're like, I don't know why you guys are so excited. I just heard it in Alaska, but you know, for Jonathan and I, we haven't heard that in a while. And
I haven't heard that
it's
since
weird.
Layered Meadow, dude.
Well, so I had it happen in Alaska, and then before I got to Bluff Creek and met up with everybody, I was in their other area in South, but still in Northern California, and I had heard a knock out there, and so it's like I don't know, it's like I guess I had it fresh in my memory, like of an encounter with that, but I guess you guys had kind of had a dry spell, not heard any wood knocks in a while, but yeah, no, I loved it because the way that this.
So I'll say what happened. We were standing around the campfire. It was Tate and I talking, and Ron was kind of dozing off.
like
Yeah.
we talked about before.
I was out, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So we're sitting there, and all of a sudden, Tate hears something rustle behind me. So he goes, "Shh, quiet." And I stop in my sentence. And just when he did that, I don't know, guesstimation 200 yards down the way, we just hear this like baseball bat sound on a tree.
Like,
What?
wow, yeah.
Now, I mean, Bigfoot aside, what could it be? You know, we want to find out what made that sound. So as soon as we heard that sound, we were all excited about it, and we're like, "Hey, Ron, wake up!" You know, because we know he's going to be up game for it. And you know, we got our stuff together. You see me right here. Look at this. Like my thermal imager is plugged into an external battery pack to make sure that it doesn't run out. Because the last thing I want to do is be on the low battery and something run out in front of you, which happened last year. Or, I'm sorry, 2 years ago in August to a certain person where they just had a low battery and something ran out in front of them. They didn't get it. This is a story that they told me. But so anyway, like I've mentioned in a previous episode that we all find ourselves thrashing through like wires and equipment and chargers and batteries and recording and all kinds of recording equipment. So we're out here walking the road looking for whatever made that knock sound. And, you know, we're open to all possibilities, but we're just trying to find what it is. And we walked, what would you say? Would you say a mile down the road? This is late
Mile,
night, maybe
mile and a
past
half.
midnight, mile and a half.
Yeah.
And down the road, and yeah, it was a really neat area. I really
Yeah.
liked it.
And this
I
is
wanna-
this
Now-
this is that second area right here
Yeah.
that we went
To elaborate on the first area real quick, Damon Irons,
I'd like to
who
do
was
that
in the
too.
Bluff Creek episode, he used to live in Boise, and he went up to a place called Deadwood Reservoir, and he found what looks like a juvenile print. I mean, it looked like a big footprint, with we're just near a reservoir, and that place has a history of sightings, and we were on the road to that place. So this general area has a history of sightings, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I
And
just
we
wanted
switched
to
to this place. Go ahead.
I just wanted to touch base real quick that there's a lot of things I actually need to touch base on, but it'll all be brief. One of the things is I like how we work together as a team. You know, even though I was stone cold, unconscious in Napsville, you know, like I like that I had the audio recording, and so we were able to capture that. And then you guys were alert and you were ready to launch the investigation. So like we worked together well in all of those elements that were in place there. And then I lost the point. I really like that area though because we found fresh bear tracks the next morning, and I mean it surprised us how many different animals were coming down, and like there was a hare up there, and all these birds were and chipmunks were coming around Bandit's food bowl and stuff. Like it surprised us what kind of how good that area was. But then also what we don't have in this series is your adventure with your lost new thermal.
That's
Oh
right.
my gosh, yeah,
So-
yeah, that was
So what you're
an emotional roller coaster.
So yeah, like what
So-
you're watching right now is like later that day, because earlier on before we filmed this, this is the second spot we went to, and then we got there, we were all setting up, and Jonathan's like, "Dude, I don't have my thermal camera," and then where's this other thing for this tent thing or this like net thing I had? So it was what, maybe 3 hours from this spot to the spot we were at the first night.
It was about 2 hours.
Yeah,
Okay, 2
2
hours?
hours if
Couple
you
hours,
if
yeah.
you book it. And now this is up 4 surface roads and stuff like that. So there was a part on this Deadwood Reservoir Road that was so steep, dude, and so weird to drive. Like it was so narrow. But I looked it up afterward, and there's like 3 YouTube videos of people just like posting how scary this one little stretch is. There was a stretch where we ran through like 1,000 butterflies. Remember that part? Like
Yeah.
there was like, for some reason, there was like 1,000 butterflies just flying around. Well, right around those areas. Like I didn't know this, but I looked it up, and like 3 or 4 cars, like in the past 3 years, have cashed it in. People have died right there, falling off that cliff where we drove, and we didn't even know it. But
Mm.
so yeah, that first location I really liked, and we heard a wood knock. What it was, we don't know. And we switched locations to a place where I previously mentioned just a few minutes ago that a resort owner may have seen something run across a ridge, and then an employee at the resort told me a very strange story as well about trees being pushed over. What that seems strategic, and on the on BFRO website, I mean, reports are littered throughout this area. There's and I like reports personally that have two people that have seen the same thing, and in both circumstances, it was 2 people, and in one circumstance, it was a husband and wife that both individually saw what looked like a gorilla man that they described run across the road in close proximity to them, and this is right where we're camped. And that resort is like 3 or 4 miles down. It's a very rural resort. There's like nobody there. We must have seen 20 people at the most at this resort.
And
and we're
this
a few
place
miles up
was
the road.
this place is really cool because I think we discussed it gave us it almost gave us Lost Camp vibes because it's kind of like in this bowl topography kind of thing, and
Yeah.
we're back in there, and there's a creek right there. And the other thing that was kind of cool is I think we didn't get it on audio or anything, but earlier on I think I heard a knock kind of like in the evening, kind of like behind Ron a little bit to the left, up in the mountain. So this like area was really good, and we had potential activity in both areas, which I think sometimes like maybe like the butterfly effect. Did we do things right the first time? Like, was it what happens if we just came to this spot, the first night and stayed 2 nights instead of going to the first spot we were at earlier?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of potential at that first spot, and you wonder what if we spent more time there. But then you also wonder here, we were so ecstatic about meeting Jeff Meldrum, who had agreed to talk with us, and and we made an appointment. We had to be there early in the morning. We didn't want to mess that up, and for good reason. That was a great conversation. We'll see that later, um, but that kind of ate into our research time. And
Yeah,
then
because
between that and Jonathan and having to go so far out of his way to find his thermal, I think we all were kind of wore out a little bit, and we knew that we had to get
Right.
up early the next morning. And that was hard because,
it was like
I remember we wanted to do a few things. We wanted to play an ape hominid video game on a projector to try and catch the curiosity of anything that might be in the area. But we also wanted to go up, walk the road, do some wood knocks, and we didn't even get around to either of those things. We really just sat in camp this night and
We
had
were
some good
exhausted,
conversation.
man. I mean,
I mean,
absolutely exhausted.
that's what happens when you spend nearly three
Mhm.
weeks, investigating Bigfoot and driving
and you're up in
massive
your
distances, to get to the next
yeah.
hot spot. I mean,
To
this was the thing
investigate,
that Idaho needs to be revisited for sure, because it surprised me how promising that state was. And I mean,
yeah.
Becky Cook has written a couple of books on it,
And
and I've been dying to get out there. It was cool to finally get out there. But we need to give it the time that we've given some other places for sure because it's a good state for Bigfoot.
and to go along
Like
with
I,
that too, going
mhm.
like how tired we were. It's like this was like because this is the second spot, and like you said, we had to get up really early because we didn't get around to the things we wanted to do. So we used that time to kind of film ourselves talking about what happened the night before, kind of what we thought about the hares, our plans to meet with Meldrum in the morning, and stuff like that. And I think I went to bed pretty early that night, and you guys were still up pretty late, and we had to get up at like 5 o'clock because Pocatello is what 6 hours from Boise, Idaho.
It was a good
It was
drive,
five and a
yeah.
half. Yeah.
Five and a
Yeah.
half. It was so yeah. We had
Well,
plans,
five and a
but
half from the location that we were. It's about 3 hours from Boise. So but it was 5.5 hours from where we were camping at this moment right here.
yeah, and we had so it was like yeah, we didn't want to like really mess it up and like miss that opportunity. So we decided to just talk about it, and like Ron said, we just had plans to do this thing, but it never happened. And again, when you're in the moment of something like this, stuff like this does happen, and you can't really control it. But also, like Ron said too, like Jonathan, you left after Bluff Creek, but Ron and I, we went to Oregon to do the hair
Well,
samples.
I
Actually,
went to Oregon
well,
too,
that's what I was going to
but
say.
I
You were
didn't go
with
to
us.
Washington.
You didn't go to
Yeah.
I didn't go to
Washington.
Washington.
Yeah, you didn't go to
Yeah.
Washington, but like, so you go to Bluff Creek and you spend like 2 weeks out there. Then you go to Oregon, and we kind of did some Bigfooting a couple nights, a little bit, and then we
Mhm.
went to Washington, and you left for that, and then you're out in Washington, and you go to Idaho. So we're just drained of driving and up to like 12 or 2 in the morning at night every
Mhm.
night, and it just takes a toll on you physically and mentally, and like at this point, what it's like 3 weeks of being in the forest, sleeping in your
I
front
think
seat and
I
stuff
think
like that.
my total time off that I took from work was like 20 days. And I mean, I did a lot better this year traveling and not losing time traveling than the year before, because I stopped a
You
few.
lost a car though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man.
This is like the part I think we were all looking forward to is
Mhm.
Meldrum.
So we had these hairs from Bluff Creek that were collected on a tree that looked suspicious. It had a strange break on it. It looked like it was twisted or snapped. And yeah, I mean, everyone can draw their own conclusions off of the video. You can go back and watch that Bluff Creek episode that Tate has. We met up with Dr. Jeff Meldrum at Idaho State University, and you see me filming right there. You see Ron explaining the circumstances on which we gathered that hair. Now, the thing with Dr. Jeff Meldrum was that I thought that, I mean, I've met, it's kind of funny, like I've met most famous celebrities that you've probably watched on TV, okay, because of my line of work back in the day. And I've never been starstruck or phased or anything like that, but I have a certain expectation, like maybe they have a bit of an ego or anything. And after about like 5 minutes, Dr. Jeff Meldrum makes you feel like you're just one of the boys.
Hmm.
He is just
Yeah.
as interested in everything you have to say as the next person. And he's totally open to anything. And I don't know how, after all these years of meeting thousands of people that have told him thousands of sightings, that he's as enthusiastic as he is. He is far more
Yeah.
humble than I ever thought he was. And
He gave
here
us.
mhm.
I was gonna say he
Here we're
gave us way more
explaining, we're
time
just
than what we had
explaining.
an appointment for.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. 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 He had a conference to get to. He had the Smoky Mountain Bigfoot conference to get to, I believe either that night or early the next morning.
It was. I
And
think it was later
we
that
ended up
day. It was later
no,
that
later
day.
that day.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. And he ended up giving us like way more time. And I mean, just like leaning back on the counter, just talking about things he's been involved in and asking us questions. And he was thoroughly trying to investigate what these hairs were. Like he didn't it wasn't something that it's something that he's seen probably over 100 times, and he treated it like if it was his first time. And I thought it was just I really appreciated that humbleness and that that intrigue for finding something new. Like this could be it. This could be the next discovery. And he had that enthusiasm and energy. And I really appreciated that given his level of expertise and credentials.
Yeah, and like his credibility and like the amount of fame he has, he
Yeah.
gave he like brought himself down to our level. If that makes sense, you know
Hmm.
what I'm saying? Like he didn't put himself
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm Jeff Meldrum and stuff, but no, it's like, and for me, this was like a surreal moment. Like this is
Hmm.
I've seen this on like Survivor Man, Bigfoot, and like I've seen pictures of him in his lab, and I was like, this is like the place you dream of going to as a
Yeah.
Bigfoot enthusiast.
Yeah.
You're like,
It,
I'm
Yeah.
actually here with Jeff Meldrum at
yeah.
Idaho State University. The thing you hear about growing up your whole life
Mhm.
involved in
It's
this.
really cool. Yeah, because I mean, one of
Just
the
to give you a
earliest
little bit of
books.
like background, just real quick, like I mean, so I personally, my profession, I'm an MRI tech that requires like a pretty good understanding of anatomy. And me, like when I watch my patients walk onto a table and they have like an ankle or foot problem, I watch how they walk. This is all because of my interest in Bigfoot, and I've affiliated a lot of my job to my interest in Bigfoot. Um, it got me through school, and it got me interested in the anatomy and also the gait that people use. I watch it all the time. It's kind of like a nerdy thing, I guess I do. But he and I had some great conversations, and there was one point where he just like I had all these questions about the mid-tarsal break and how it works, and he explained it to me how it's like almost like a trochlear joint that moves in, not uh it's kind of a visual thing, so I'll leave that for another time. But
What did Ron have to
he
say?
gave me a great understanding of the mid-tarsal break and everything like that. So it was great talking to him.
Yeah, and he's got so much to contribute towards different things of physiology, anatomy, and biological study. So that he's going into this really in-depth conversation about the differences of hair structure and I mean we talked about gait and things as well and but I really enjoyed these conversations with him. But more about the hairs that we talked about. I didn't really have a chance to say this in the commentary from the last episode, but I feel like I could have done better about the hair collection. So that was a learning process because what I realized was there were tons of different hairs under the microscope that belonged to different species. We looked at something that looked like a marten or some type of weasel based off of the
Sure.
physiology of the hair, and then we looked at a couple of different dark and light colored bear hairs with prominent medullas. And then we looked at what looked like a Bigfoot hair based off of the untapered end and the lack of a medulla. And so we had a couple of different hair structures, fine and otherwise, coarse hairs that we collected. And I knew to separate the ones from one tree and the other tree. But one thing that I had the absence of mind in doing was there was the initial break of the tree itself, the damage, the physical trauma to the tree, and there were hairs that were wedged in to the broken strands of the tree. But then there were hairs that later got caught on resin, and the absence of mind came from the fact that the accumulation of resin or sap is a slow process. The tree is bleeding, but its sap is thick and it takes a long time. So what I didn't realize at that time when I was collecting the hairs was it was two different time frames from the initial break and the hairs that got caught, and then the resin, the sap that caught with its sticky attributes, caught the hairs of animals that scraped by the tree. So I should have had a total of three different collection containers because there was the one tree, the second tree, and the sap from the second tree that collected hairs weeks, months later.
Yeah, and it's funny
Man.
because like we would in the commentary, not the commentary, but the narration here, we were talking about like yeah, there's like do hairs come from different parts of the body? It's like an explanation why you see fragments of a medulla, and that's the kind of theory we were thinking maybe at Cliff's museum. But when we talked to Meldrum, we kind of like because like what was it hair analysis of like the Bigfoot subject is kind of it's very unknown still. I would say, in my opinion. So could a hair from a different part of the body not be as blunt as like say like a chest or the leg, right? That's a characteristic of Sasquatch hair is a blunt end, no medulla. But
Right.
could it? So like that was kind of our thinking. Like, what if it was a different
Well,
part of the body?
well, from my understanding, because I watched a program with Doug Hychek not too long ago, and they say that the untapered end is something that is reminiscent of just wild animals in general, because the tapered end is from a cut or artificial severing. But
Like if you get a haircut kind of thing.
yeah, but I mean, but we talked to Meldrum. I remember talking to him about other examples of artificial tampering. Like what if an animal something where to crush the hair, or if the animal was chewing on its hair on its leg or arm or something like that? Could it taper the end? Could it sever the end and cut it or break it, and kind of create a similar effect of that tapered end? And he kind of verified that, yeah, I mean, like cutting and breaking, whether it's by shears or scissors or by incisors, like it can happen. However, it can happen. So that's not really, to my understanding, from what I'm hearing from various sources, the tapered and untapered element is not really a great example to go by. All that implies is that the hair has been artificially destroyed, or damaged by physical trauma. Um, I might be missing something there, but I mean, we talked about a lot of that stuff, and really the medulla and the shades and texture, the colors of the hair, kind of gives you an idea.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah. Now,
kind of as
one
this
thing.
thing
Go ahead.
as this thing ends, we kind of it shows like we what we've seen like throughout the whole series. We heard well, I mean, for me at least, I heard knocks and stuff in Idaho or Iowa, tree breaks in California and stuff like that in
Hmm.
Idaho, and It's just weird.
Yeah, there's a
Uh,
lot of things to look at and review, and the narrative that's shaped by people who say they know about something, like we checked it, and we what we found out was the answers aren't always as clear, but there's a little bit of an anomaly there that we still don't understand. There's still enough there, enough of a mystery that's enticing
yeah.
to keep us invested,
We
but
went out, we went out and we looked for mysterious, undescribable things. And we found hair, we found footprints. And then when we did find them, we didn't just stop there. We tried to take them to take them to get studied to the fullest extent. We took them to Cliff Brackman, who's had 20 years plus of like looking at this stuff. We took them to Dr. Jeff Meldrum, who's had over a couple decades of studying this stuff, and we really tried to get to the end of it.